to Saturday night. You can't pick up the phone right now. We're live.
This is very important.
Is it the Prime Minister of Canada?
No, it's more important.
Your mom?
No, less important.
Who is it?
It's the Ontario YouTube coordinator. Hello?
Hello. Hey, Maria. How's it going? Has SNL started yet?
Yeah, it's like 6:03.
Oh, okay, cool. You know what? I'll make it super quick. Remember, this is the last and final episode of Saturday Night Live, okay? So we need a very strong finish and make sure you thank everyone. Okay? Stay very focused, yeah? Please keep your phone away. Don't keep posting it on stuff on Instagram, please. All right. Thank you so much. Talk soon.
Bye.
So before we were rudely interrupted, hello and welcome to Saturday Night Live.
My name is Maria.
And I'm Janet, and we're super excited to host the last episode of this series on behalf of the SNL crew.
All right, so let's get things rolling. First up, housekeeping. Number one, this is a live recording. So what does that mean? That means that this is a live stream that will be recorded and will be on YouTube, and it will be approximately 45 minutes.
All right, and interact with us. We'd love to hear from you. So make sure you like, share, comment, and hit that big red button below to subscribe and get our latest notifications.
And do you have any questions? If so, feel free to put it in the chat and we'll try to get through as many questions as possible.
Well, speaking of live chat, why don't we test it out with a quick game before we dive right into the session? Two truths and a lie, or as we like to call it, how well do you know your Canadian saints? Okay, so this is how it works. We'll be showing you three options on screen, out of which there are two statements that are true and one false statement. So your job's pretty simple. Just make sure you spot the lie and tell us in the chat box if it's A, B, or C. So Maria, why don't you take it away?
So before that, let's make sure this live chat thing actually works. So can I get everyone to quickly just put something into the chat? Thumbs up, a quick hello, hi, just to let us know who's here.
Yeah, let's see who's on.
Wow, hello, Christina. Thank you for joining us, Maria. Hey, Jacob. Yes, thank you, Maria. We're so excited to have you guys here. So let's get started with our first question. So this one's relatively easy. So let us know which statement is false. First statement, A, is there are more than 7 Canadian martyrs. B, the Canadian Martyrs Shrine is located in Caledon, Ontario. And C, the Canadian Martyrs Feast Day is on September 26th. So to all you Ontario folks out there, this should be super easy. Let's get those answers in. Yes, good job, Kevin. Thank you for your response. Who else? Come on. Yes, Jacob. Thank you for your response.
All right.
Cool, yes, and Kevin, you are right. The false answer is B. So why is it false? It's false because the Canadian Martyr Shrine is actually located in Midland, Ontario.
That's right. Well, I'd say that was a pretty simple one to start off with. Now let's see if our viewers are going to get the second question. So this is what the second question is. Our first statement here is that Saint Andre Bessette is buried at the St. Joseph's Oratory in Quebec. A second statement, Saint Margaret Duville is the patron saint of widows, difficult marriages, and death of young children. And our last statement, Saint 𝐶𝐀𝐃𝐃 is the first Canadian-born saint. So any idea which is the false one? Come on, guys. How well do we know our Canadian saints? Oh, I think we do have a right answer from Christina. That's correct. So Saint 𝐶𝐃𝐃 is not the first Canadian-born saint. She was actually born in New York, and the first Canadian-born saint is Saint Margaret Duville.
Wow, fun fact, my home parish is St. Margaret de Ville. I guess now I know a fact about my parish's patron saint. Cool. So hope those weren't too bad, but now let's add some bonus questions. So these bonus questions are actually going to be based off of SNL. If you've been following our episodes somewhat consistently, you should know the answers. So let's get started. Statement A is, we have had a host join us live from Winnipeg. Statement B, we've had 8 international resources on SNL. And statement C, one of the SNL guest speakers performed live for us on one of our episodes. What do you guys think is false?
Who's been watching SNL? That's the real question.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, okay, so there's slight confusion between A and B right now.
Oh yes, Jim thinks it's C. That's cool.
A host.
Oh yes, it's a host, just to clarify. So host is the MC, the person who will be having the conversation with our guest speaker.
All right, so now that we have a couple of answers in.
Yeah, the right or the wrong statement is A. We have actually had hosts join us live from Nova Scotia, from Calgary, and obviously from Ontario, but we've never had a host from Winnipeg.
That's right. So now you guys know. And moving on to our next bonus question, or I'd like to say our last bonus question based on SNL as well. So as you can see, the first statement is, Bill Donaghy left halfway through the episode to move his car. The second statement, this is Saturday Night Live's 20th episode since this initiative began. And option C, Sharon and Joel gave us a detailed explanation of how a nasal aspirator works. So any ideas about this one, guys? There's one false statement in here. Oh, do we have an answer in there? Okay, interesting. I see A, B, C, all of them are in there right now.
Oh, can I clarify? He meant C.
Okay, C, all right. Okay, well, you guys are right, Kevin and Jacob. So the false statement is that Sharon and Joel gave us a detailed explanation, because although this did happen on one of our episodes, it was Julia and John. So as you can tell, it was a pretty fun episode. So if you've missed it, make sure you check it out.
Yep. All right, let's get down to business.
Now, moving on to our guest speaker, we're so honored to welcome back a face that's familiar to many JYs across the country. And what better time than today, as it marks the 1-year anniversary of Ablaze.
So for those of you that are hearing this for the first time, Ablaze was our first ever national leaders training that was held last summer.
He was born and raised in Saskatoon, enrolled in the seminary in London, Ontario, and he's well versed in the Dene language, which is one of the many languages that our First Nations brothers and sisters speak. And he's the head of a diocese with about 80% Indigenous people.
So it is my honor to welcome the Most Reverend Murray Chatlain, the Archbishop of Keewatin-Le Pas.
Thank you, Maria. Janet.
Your Grace, it's so nice to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, but a little intimidated that I might have to discuss nasal aspirators or something like that. So I'm a little concerned.
Hopefully not this time.
So what have you been up to during the summer?
Well, COVID has meant that I've been traveling a little less than I usually do. So I've been doing a bit more fishing and reading and I guess looking after my garden a little bit more this summer.
Wow, that's awesome. So yeah, let's get down to the session. We're very interested to hear more about the topic that you've chosen to speak on, considering that it's so relative, in the current day and age. So let's get started with the Catholic take on racism. So what is racism according to you?
One of the definitions people talk about is prejudice with power. So it's not simply to have prejudice, but that once they're the people with the power in the society has prejudice, and then that gets translated into really disenfranchising a whole group of people. So that's one, I think, effective definition of racism, when prejudice with power means that it has a real impact and a real effect.
Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunate that in today's day and age we hear a lot more about it or see more of it than we'd like. So, out of curiosity, have you ever witnessed any form of racism or racial discrimination in person?
I think all of us have had some experience of a degree of racism, and mine is pretty minor. But when I was a young boy, I grew up in Saskatoon, and my dad was taking education in Montreal area. So we moved from Saskatchewan to Montreal for 1 year, and I had no French. And so I remember coming to a school that was, no one spoke English except one other little student. And I went to visit after school. I got invited to play at a family's yard. And the mother came out and yelled at me and kicked me out of the yard for speaking English. And I understand the need to preserve a language and what was going on. But for a young boy, not yet knowing French or anything, that was not a pleasant experience. And again, I quickly learned how to speak French pretty reasonably because I realized that was what I needed to do. But it gives me a little bit of an insight. That's a minor thing, but what many people have experienced, especially our Indigenous people who were asked not to speak their languages at school and other places.
Wow, that's yeah. I'm sorry that happened. But what are, like you mentioned, you've seen how this happens with Indigenous people. So what are some of your experiences with how this relates to those that you work with on a day-to-day basis, your congregation, your community, in your archdiocese?
I think that one of the poverties that we experience is self-esteem. That are often our people were told that the Indigenous culture, the people themselves were sort of second or third class, that they needed to become civilized, and so that was a lot of colonial judgment that was part of that. And so we just recognize how that self-esteem, to have pride in being Dene or Cree or Ojibwe or these things, to have a healthy pride is a very important part of our self-esteem for the people. And so now we're trying to find ways to bolster and encourage that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and just along the same lines, recently there's been a lot of buzz, especially around the Black Lives Matter movement, and also a lot of controversy surrounding the All Lives Matter slogan. So in your opinion, what is the Catholic Church's stand on this?
Well, I think it's recognizing that the United States has a very different history than Canada does. And the Black struggle and issue in the United States has been 200 years of a lot of struggle. And so just to respect the Black Lives Matter, the efforts that are being made to make progress. This is not anything new. A quote is taken from Martin Luther King Jr. from 57 years ago. And it could be very appropriate today, and it's very eloquent, I think, in calling us to respond to physical challenge with soul health, and to respond in the high ground. And so it's just a reminder that this challenge has been going on for a long time, and it'll continue probably, unfortunately, for a while yet. In Canada, there's been different areas that there has been racism and prejudice, but probably the largest group is with our Indigenous people. And certainly in my part of the world, that the Indigenous peoples have been the primary ones affected by racism in our society.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, Your Grace, we're just, we want to open up the forum for you to share anything else that you want to share on the Catholic Church's take on racism. in general, and if there's anything else you want to share.
I'm not that wise or eloquent, so I'm going to quote from Archbishop Harry Flynn. And Archbishop Harry Flynn from the Minnesota area, he wrote, "For our own spiritual development, it is important that each of us come to understand that loving only people who are just like ourselves, loving only those who share our own ethnic or cultural background, does not adequately fulfill the challenge of the gospel. All of us are called to develop a sense of solidarity with our neighbors who are racially and culturally distinct from us. In doing so, we begin to live out the unity and diversity that is reflected in the life of the Holy Trinity." And so as Catholic, we are encouraged to embrace the other, that there is a giftedness in God. He likes different things. He doesn't just sort of make a cookie cutter thing in any of our creation. We just look at insects or trees, that he's so creative in all the differences. And it's also true of human beings. And so when we start to pigeonhole or stereotype a particular group, we're impoverishing everybody by not appreciating what that group has to offer. We lose their gifts.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing these interesting insights on this topic. We just want to encourage all the viewers to send in any questions that you have for our Q&A segment as we move into that. So first question is, what is the Catholic approach to stopping racism? And this question actually came in from one of our viewers, from Christina. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. It's a very important question. I think one of the key pieces is education. That when we educate ourselves, ignorance and fear are often the pieces that most bring out the negative responses of crowds and individuals. So educating, becoming aware ourselves of some of our history, of the background of peoples, I think really helps us. So I was just going to give a little bit of education around the Indian Act. So Canada, when it was trying to have settlers come to fill the farming so that they could develop Canada's land, they needed to quickly make treaties with the Aboriginal people so that the settlers could come in and not be at odds with them right away. So Canada quickly started an Indian Act. This piece of legislature has not been very friendly. It has been very racist. So I'll just give you some examples which most Canadians don't know. In 1884, the Indian Act was amended to prohibit traditional Indian ceremonies such as potlatch, sundance, sweat lodge, and powwows. So in 1884, it became illegal, you could be arrested, to practice the traditional spirituality of the Indigenous peoples in Canada. In 1886, the Indian Act policy was instituted that confined Indians to small reserves. They were required to obtain passes from their Indian agent. Every reserve had an Indian agent before they could leave their reserves for short periods of time. This policy of apartheid never passed legislation. Nevertheless, it was enforced as if it were and persisted into the 1940s. So people were prisoners in their own country. In 1906, the Indian Act was amended to make it possible to remove Indians from reserves near towns with a population over 8,000. So once the settlers came in and were a larger group, they could just move the Indigenous people to a further away area, out of mind, out of sight. 1914, the Indian Act was amended banning Indians from wearing traditional and ceremonial dress in public. So I'm kind of wearing this ribbon shirt, which is a very traditional thing and a sign of respect and celebration. Wouldn't be allowed to wear this at that time. In 1920, Duncan Scott, the Deputy Superintendent of Indian Affairs, started residential schools. And it became obligatory for students from 7 till 15 years of old to attend the residential schools. In 1920, the Indian Act was amended to make it an offense for Indians to hire lawyers to seek legal counsel. So again, part of our Canadian history that most don't know. And the last amendment that I'll talk about to the Indian Act was in 1927. It became illegal for Indians to solicit or raise funds for the purpose of filing land claims. So it was like so many of the deck was stacked against the Indigenous people to be able to hold their own against the settlers that were moving in. So the more we educate ourselves, that we're aware of our real history, I think it really decreases our sense of fear and ignorance with other peoples.
Wow. Yeah, I definitely wasn't aware that it was so ingrained into some of the laws here in Canada back in the day. And I mean, similarly on that note, we were just wondering, usually a first response, if we're a victim to racism, is anger. So what is a good way to tackle such a situation when we're basically put in an environment like that?
Well, that's where Jesus is very important, because he modeled, how best to respond. And he did it a variety of ways. Sometimes he responded with some anger when he felt that that was the appropriate response. Sometimes he responded with just trying to be educated and work with the group that he was with. And sometimes he became just silent, that he just accepted that there was no arguing with this, and he didn't continue to respond in any vocal way. So I think he models for us. It's so much, and it's so difficult about taking the high road, that we don't respond to hatred with more hatred. And that takes a lot of prayer and a lot of patience, and we're not always going to rise to the high road, I'm afraid.
Yeah, that's true. And again, on a similar note, as Catholics, you discussed the Catholic Church's perspective or Catholic Church's take on racism. So how can we show solidarity with that perspective? What can we do? How can we be hot and not lukewarm? Not just sit around and watch. What can we do? Or in your perspective?
I think all of us have a part to play. And one of the things I would encourage us is to be really aware of us and them conversations. When you get together and you start talking about them, usually it's hard to keep those in a fair and respectful way. And so examples would be, I would go into living in some of our Indigenous communities, reserves, and the RCMP and nurses would come in, and they were from a different culture, and they were new to those communities, and they were always us and them conversations, complaining about the things that was, why do the people do this? Why is it like that? What is going on here? And, most of them were just new. They were frustrated. And those conversations were not that healthy. And so they did need to continue to grow. And often once they were there for a while, that those conversations could change a lot. But I would say for yourselves, when you find yourself in an us and them conversation, try to step back and say, is this really respectful? Is this really seeking understanding? Or are we stereotyping, putting people into really stuck places?
Yeah, and I think, innately in our human nature, it constantly comes down to the fact that creates a divide, without realizing it as well. So a greater awareness, like you said, that it's not us and them, it's all of us together. So. Thank you, Your Grace, for sharing your thoughts with us. And, as we're almost nearing the end, would you mind giving us a blessing as we wrap up this episode and the initiative on the whole?
I just would like to say just before finishing is I encourage you to share stories. That you share your stories of your own experience of racism, and then to be open to hearing those of others. One of the best gifts I've received is people sharing their stories of being hurt or racism. We all have our blind spots. So when we share our stories, I think it helps to take some of that blindness away. Quick little story is one of my friends from La Loche, who's Dene. He was down with his son in Saskatoon, and they were in the hotel, staying at a hotel that had a swimming pool and hot tub. And the son says to him, Dad, I'd like to go into the hot tub, but it's pretty crowded. And so the dad said, well, if we get into the hot tub, it won't be crowded. And sure enough, they went and climbed in, and everyone else got out of the hot tub. And when he shared that story, it stuck with me. And it just helped me to recognize some of the little things that we do that hurt. So I encourage all of you to feel free to share the stories that we experience, that we can keep learning from them. And so I'll give you a blessing now in God's grace. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
Almighty God, loving Father, you sent your Son Jesus among us because we weren't getting it. We were slow to understand your will for us, your love for us, and your call to love all people. In Jesus, you gave us a beautiful model, but it's interesting that no one describes what he looked like. No one tells us what color he was, if he was tall or short or whatever. That is a mystery that speaks to us, that we are called to find Jesus in all people. And may God's blessing be upon all of you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much once again for joining us. We really appreciate the time you've taken out of your busy schedule to be with us today. And we will be praying for you and your ministry.
All right, folks. Well, that brings us to the end of a very long summer for us, but we hope you enjoyed watching this episode as much as we enjoyed hosting.
As always, last week's episode will be up tomorrow, so in case you missed it, you can still check it out.
Once again, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to JY Ontario's YouTube channel.
Last but not least, a lot of time and effort has gone into these last 20 episodes, so I want to take a moment to appreciate everything that I've done. Okay, my bad. And a huge shout out to our SNL crew. To start off with, Vinith, our one and only almighty leader.
Edwin, Mr. Fix-It, who knows all about problem solving and exactly how to make the impossible possible.
Jacob, our live stream expert who can make all this magic happen.
My co-host Maria, our official cheerleader and supreme motivator.
And Janet, our all-in-one speedy Wonder Woman.
And Jaren, the in-house creative genius.
Kevin, the innovator of the team with the best ideas.
Rihanna, the load reliever who stepped in and helped out just when we needed it.
And not to forget some of our founding members, Kristen, our veteran host, Jovan, the scheduler, and Ajin, our prayer champ.
Last but not the least, Ajit Lukos, the Ontario Regional Council Coordinator, for his constant support throughout this time.
And that finally brings us to the end of today's episode and this season itself, or this series itself. So this is the SNL crew signing off.
Thank you all. Stay safe. Enjoy your evening. God bless.
Bye.